So what happens, I will always assume that, people go into politics with good intentions.
Yes.
Right. But the game is the game, right? Like at what point so a person who goes in with great intentions, they become a politician, they're in this political game. I'm always curious, at what point do those good intentions get sacrificed?
He's trying to say, when do they start accepting the bribe?
Because again, I'm coming from, and again, and the reason I'm having these conversations, because these are conversations that I'm having with people.
Yeah.
And especially for people who look at politics and all politicians as corrupt.
Yeah.
Again, I believe that, most people go into it with the good intentions, but because politics is what it is, and the very nature of politics is you do this for me, I do this for you. How does, and maybe it's not a question that has a specific answer, but I'm just always curious, how in the journey, at what point, again,
do people turn?
Do the good intentions get compromised in the sake of politics? That makes sense.
So I understand the question, and I respect the sentiment behind it. I do think it's kind of loaded with assumptions.
Sure.
That all politicians go off the rails. I think, unfortunately, and I can speak for myself, you do go in with this pure heart, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to change the world and I'm going to make it better. And they may not always get the attention, and the work may not always get the attention, but it's still being done. And the ability to vote people out, the ability to make a change comes every few years. So, and I'll give giving myself as an example, when I made the decision not to run for mayor of Atlanta again, it was because I felt my season was over in that space, and that for Atlanta to get the best work, it was time to pass the baton on. Didn't mean that I couldn't do it, but it meant personally, I knew that season was over and it was time for me to step back from that space. Now, I'm, not saying I'm like Mother Teresa and I deserve a crown for that, but I do think it would be great if more people did that self-assessment. At what point have I done the things that I set out to do? At what point is it time to pass the baton on and allow someone else to continue this work? That's what I did, because I always felt like Atlanta deserved the best of whatever someone had to give. And for me, it was, all right, I've completed this leg of the race. I'm going to pass this baton on to someone else. And whether that's done through us asking that our elected officials have term limits. In Atlanta, you can serve 2 terms as mayor. I decided to serve 1. Congress, you can serve forever until you literally are rolled out on a gurney. Maybe we need to have that conversation. Do we want people to have term limits? Do we want the opportunity to vote more often on certain offices? Or do we want them to be able to serve longer terms to get better work out of them? Again, this goes back to this, it's our democracy. So we collectively get to make these rules and call on people to do better.
And we have a vote. And we have to use it wisely.
Some elected officials, you get to vote every 2 years. Some it's every 4. Some it's every 6.
But you mentioned the job, and that I think that happens at every job, that you have somebody who might be there just too long, What's Sammy doing? Nobody knows what Sammy's doing in that department, but he's been here so long, no one's going to bother him. But you mentioned your husband a couple of times, and I would imagine that those conversations just at home to say, okay, because you pass the baton collectively as a family, right? Yes. This is not just you. And I would imagine those conversations had to be very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Take me there.
We're both lawyers, so they can get very spirited. Nobody wants to back down. Nobody wants to lose the fight. But also, just it's great to have somebody else just to talk things through. And he brings a different perspective than I have, because I was an elected official for 12 years. So in some ways, my thought process maybe lean a little too much to thinking of, the inside part of it. And it's nothing like, your husband and your kids talking to you about the rest of the world while you're thinking about what's happening in your little bubble. So yeah, it's always spicy.
I like that word. It's spicy.
Always spicy.